Hey everybody, Easter is just around the corner, and I thought to myself, what better way to get into the spirit than watch some horror movies? I recently stumbled across a movie by the name of Bunnyman Massacre, and then after a quick Google search, I found out that this is actually a trilogy. So we're going to start off with the first one, simply known as Bunnyman. Now, the film has been recut and more footage has been added into the re-release in 2019, which is known as Bunnyman Grindhouse Edition. However, I will be reviewing the original 2011 release. Aw, come on now. Don't you worry. The 2011 edition of the film has a review on the poster from Patrick of Video Views. Bunnyman hops onto the screen as a new icon of horror. So, that's promising. So go ahead and sit back, grab a snack, and let's get into the first installment of this trilogy. The movie starts up with an old 8mm film depicting a woman appearing to be escaping from a bathtub while being covered in dry blood. She wanders around for a while and nothing seems to happen as she tries to escape her unseen captor. She finally makes her way out of the building just to scream and hold her head before running off into the woods. She is then killed by a man in a gardening hat who shoves the knife into her mouth and then stabs her to death and licks the blood off of the knife. She's now covered in more blood, but the stab wounds at least seem to have healed. Unfortunately now, she is dead. And after that we get the title screen and we are welcomed into the movie, Bunnyman. We then have an extreme close-up of a girl as she's escaping a refrigerator in the middle of nowhere. She gets out and begins to trip all over herself, falling in the abandoned field of construction equipment. She tries to hide in a truck as a man in a bunny suit wielding a chainsaw wanders around. It doesn't appear that he sees her, however, she still books it, trying to hide in the back of a different truck, which she seems to enjoy slamming the door of. She takes a breather and the truck starts driving. The bed of the truck is filled with store-bought bone decor from the Halloween store or Walmart, depending on where you like to shop. It doesn't even look like it came out of the packaging that it was purchased in. We then meet our 6 youths. As they silently ride in the packed car, ominous music plays as they kiss hands or something, hold hands, make jokes, I'm not really too sure. They drive silently for what feels like an eternity before they get stuck behind the construction truck from earlier, the one driven by the Bunnyman and with the girl in the back of the bed of the truck. They talk about passing him, but due to the truck's reckless driving, John thinks it's a bit risky. They pass him and the truck follows them in anger, and then passes them and slows down. They have a little showdown on the road, and John almost hits an oncoming car passing the truck. So it's essentially a less entertaining scene from that one Christmas movie. You know the one. We continue to have ominous music drones and a slow following chase scene in the vehicles. They continue to panic and have awfully dubbed in lines that aren't even mixed with the rest of the movie's audio. The chase scene continues until the truck behind them collides into their car, which is pretty bad looking, to be honest. The cuts make it obvious that the car was never hit. I'm just assuming that they don't want to damage the rental. They get hit again before John decides to pull off the road while saying,
I really hope this is a good idea.
Huh?
I really hope this is a good idea.
What?
I really hope this is a good idea.
Uh-huh, okay. Yeah, whatever you said, John. As they finally pulled over, they debate on who should talk to the enraged truck driver. They decided to send John's girlfriend, so she tries to be all sexy when she tries to calm down the road-raged rabbit. Rachel hears someone crying in the truck and tries to go see what's going on. However, Bunnyman honks the horn, both warning Rachel to stop and for John to stay in the car. John saying, what if Rachel is hurt?
Mike, she could be hurt.
Rachel tries to open the cab door only to get knocked back, where John's previous line probably would have been more appropriate here. Rachel climbs back into the car and the group weighs their options, deciding to wait out the truck before eventually Bunnyman gets tired and leaves. We have a Seinfeld-style fade to black. And we are back on the road. John takes his eyes off the road for just a minute and almost crashes into the truck that the Bunnyman is now waiting in. They are swerved off of the road and run into a bush, which somehow incapacitates the car. Bunnyman finally deals with the woman in the back of the truck, chaining her up to a tree and then also to the back of the truck and driving off, thus ripping her in half. We flash back to the crew, all waiting in the car for what? I'm not entirely sure, before the other nameless characters decide to look at the car. sniffing some dirt from his hand, shaking his head, and then slamming the hood, like most dudes do when we look at the car and act like we know what we're doing. After slamming the hood of the car, Janet groans and says,
Jack, people are trying to sleep.
Yeah, whatever, Jen.
Since when are you a mechanic?
Since you started being a bitch?
Can we just kill these people already? It's been nearly an hour. 20 minutes? It's only been 20 minutes? Jack grabs some tools from the back and puts himself under the car to take a look at it. That's when the Bunnyman hits the car and drives over Jack. Rachel goes to see if Jack's okay, telling him to wake up. Come on, Rachel. Some of us are trying to sleep here. Am I right? Janet? They leave the car and head down the trail. Eventually, they come up on one of those crosses in the road, and John and Mike have a debacle, and whoa! Janet! Did you just knock over one of those memorials to the people who were killed on the roadside? We continue to make our way down the rabbit trail to see more of the Walmart Halloween bag of bones now hanging from trees. They continue down the road and find a pair of boots attached to a human. They ask him how he's doing and explain their situation, asking to use the cell phone of the boot man, and Rachel decides to comment on the bag of bones, who says it isn't proper burial procedure. Boot sips on some tea, beer, urine, I'm not too sure, but he has a comeback to Rachel and her concern about the burial procedure.
Well, it's not exactly the proper burial procedure.
Well, you know whose bones they are?
No.
Then don't worry about it.
After they ask to use the cell phone once again, he responds, claiming they can use it depending on who asks and how. Boots makes more crude comments and sexual harassments. They offer to pay him, they haggle more and more, and the scene goes on forever, with the same bird ambient sound effects looping continuously in the background. The situation escalates and Boots pulls out a gun, and our crew moves out. They continue to walk on aimlessly, and eventually the situation gets the best of them, resulting in a giant blow-up between Mike and his girlfriend, whose name I don't really remember. Tiffany? Tiffany. Okay, I'll probably forget later. Tiffany throws a rock at him as he follows her. We pan to two more characters collecting a body, Jacob, and the other is a woman whose name eludes me. I'm sure I'll have to look at IMDb for that later. They see our protagonists making their way down the road, and wanting to avoid having to give them a ride, decide to come up with a quick story using the bloodied hand of the body they picked up. We also learn that the father of Jacob has told the two of them to stop playing with the bodies, and that Jacob has a tendency to feel them up. So I believe that based on the dialogue, these two might be siblings. They have a quick exchange asking for a ride, and John suddenly turns into a car expert when the sister says their car isn't working. She says that there isn't enough room when they admit that the car is working. They then go to plan B, which is that Jacob's hand is hurt from fixing the car earlier and that they have to get to the emergency room. Jacob and his sister seem to have an argument on how to handle the protags and then decide to befriend them so that they will stay there so they can come back and kill them later. Our friends fall asleep and the morning comes, and Jacob and his sister, whose name I have now found out to be Melissa thanks to IMDb, have never returned. Mike fell asleep on his girlfriend Tiffany, and Tiffany scoots away to pull a hilarious prank and make him fall over. Glad they can still laugh in this situation that has ear-piercing drones in it trying to build up tension. John says he feels like something has been watching them, so they go ahead and try to find the abandoned cabin that Melissa had pointed them to earlier. That way they can avoid the heat and continue traveling at nightfall by the highway. Janet and Mike begin to wander around and come across the Bunnyman, who is busy playing with brain tissue. Mike trips and bumps into Janet, and they have a stupid squabble which leads to the Bunnyman hearing them and snagging Janet. Janet is now horrified as she realizes she is surrounded by dead bodies, all two of them. Her fear is short-lived, however, much like my patience for this film, as the Bunnyman chainsaws her to death, so I don't have to worry about getting her name right anymore. Mike runs by the waiting group and says, "Time to go," and everyone is like, what? What's going on, Mike? But they run with him anyway. They all run into the cabin they were searching for in the first place. They just brush over the fact that Janet is dead. I mean, to be honest, I don't care, but they probably should, considering she was their friend, right? Mike asks Greenshirt if she's okay, and they proceed to kiss passionately as they board up the windows. However, they all just stop boarding up windows and doors as soon as they hear a chainsaw because I guess they're overtaken by fear? They lift up a bed and expect that to stop a chainsaw. What? That actually worked? Huh. Well, they managed to disarm the Bunnyman by pulling the bed forward, and Mike grabs the chainsaw. Mike talks to the Bunnyman like you do when you finally beat your friend at a fighting game, and Bunnyman just kind of is like, I don't want to play anymore, and wanders off. Then Mike kind of just turns around and leaves, instead of attacking the killer that just murdered his 2 friends. Greenshirt says they aren't alone in the building, and the chainsaw stalls. We meet another character who looks like he just lost his jacket and top hat for a steampunk cosplay. However, Steampunk Pete is chained up to the wall right now and can't do much of anything except grunt at them. Greenshirt tries to leave through the window and catches a knee from a waiting Bunnyman, which genuinely made me laugh. Bunnyman grabs her while entering the cabin, and Mike and John run off. Bunnyman throws the laziest tantrum, just kind of grunting and lightly kicking a chair over, because I'm assuming that the chairs belong to the Airbnb they must have rented. Mike tries to get in the truck that Bunnyman drove earlier in the film and fumbles around for several minutes looking for what, I'm not sure, just to get yoinked by the Bunnyman. Mike manages to escape and goes under the cabin. Mike finds a body underneath the abandoned cabin and then just gets chainsawed for his efforts. His last words were, "Go ahead, fucking kill me, you piece of shit!" And Bunnyman does just that. Jennifer runs through the woods after escaping Steampunk Pete, and if you look close enough, her blood is missing in several shots. She climbs up a tree hoping to get away as a simple thump-thump plays. Bunnyman wanders on up and cuts the tree down, but since we don't actually have permission to cut down the tree, we don't actually see the chainsaw cutting anything. Jennifer screams for Bunnyman to take his mask off for some reason and magically changes insult mid-insult.
Take off your fucking mask!
She falls out of the tree and is now unconscious. Bunnyman is now setting up his camera and takes off his gloves and lets his little henchman off of the chain. Bunnyman takes off his gloves and prepares his utensils just to throw them back down and pick them back up again, just to put them back down again. Productive. He puts on classical music, because of course he does, he has to get in the right mindset for the killing. Then he pulls out a toolbox, instead of just using the table of tools that he's been messing with for the past 20 minutes. He grows tired of her screams and tapes her mouth shut. Then finally he grabs his nail gun. He shoots her with his nail gun the same way he chopped down the tree, kind of off camera. He pulls the tape off and begins to pull her teeth out, which actually seemed like a pretty good shot and effect to me. Then finally he pulls out his trusty chainsaw, cutting her up. Although I think she's supposed to be dead, we can still kind of see her breathing. Cut to John and Rachel planning to rescue Greenshirt, whose name I now remember is Tiffany. Well, if they don't care, I don't either. However, it doesn't really matter because she is now a skeleton. John looks for a set of keys so they can escape, and Rachel is the worst lookout ever as we see the girl from earlier begin to come up and hug Bunnyman, who is lazily cooking a pair of ribs over a trash can fire. Come on, man.
Taste the meat, not the heat.
And I start to wonder what happened to Jacob from before. Maybe they beat him into oblivion like she said she would. They all sit down and have the driest looking ribs that I've ever seen in my life. And she tells Bunnyman to take his mask off, where he pouts like a giant child. And here we see one of the better parts of the movie. Bunnyman's makeup and cosmetics under the actual mask are pretty cool looking in my opinion. John and Rachel look on horrified at the silent dinner scene as they notice the keys. The door creaks and it sets off the Bunnyman. They try to make a run for it, past the Bunnyman, but John gets caught in the rabbit trap, and he yells for Rachel to go on without him, but she just stops and watches Bunnyman knock him out. The girl from the truck, Melissa, comes up and punches Rachel lazily and knocks her out. Rachel wakes up in a wheelchair, tied up and watching some old cartoon as the Hunchback of Notre Dame hobbles around in his seat. Bunnyman is playing with the trailer park version of a plasma ball and notices Rachel has awoken, to which he grunts and points at her. John begins to use something to cut himself free and shows Rachel that he's doing that, which props to him, that's actually a smart move so that she can prepare for when he escapes. Bunnyman sits down at the couch, and then Melissa from the truck comes up to harass Rachel. The incoherent rambles that come out of Melissa's mouth are completely stupid. They aren't intimidating, they aren't scary, and she asks Rachel if she thinks she's beautiful. Bunnyman starts wrestling with Goggles the gargoyle, but gets told to stop as Melissa yells at her. She rambles more about Rachel being prettier than her, and then she says, "The pretty ones die young." Hey! That's the tagline of the movie. Congratulations to Bunnyman for using the tagline in your movie. Really shoehorned that one in. People said you couldn't do it, but you decided to anyways. Thanks, I guess. She asked the boys do they think it's fair that Rachel is prettier than her, and Bunnyman just kind of shrugs, which got a laugh out of me. Rachel spits on her captive and receives a smack in return. They turn on music and prepare to get to work on Rachel. She asks what they think of Rachel's face, and Bunnyman gives a thumbs down. This whole thing continues on for far too long before John finally gets out and pushes the lady over. John grabs the chainsaw and the keys, untying Rachel as Rachel laughs, trying to act like she's finally lost it. She runs off to do what John says finally, so that whole thing didn't really seem to matter. Melissa tries to talk John down, but John just chainsaws her to death. The chainsaw dies and John just kind of puts it down and leaves. Rachel and John are now driving away. John, for whatever reason, suggests that he should be the one to drive. So Rachel pulls over, and guess who pulls up behind them? And they would just sit there. The Bunnyman in his truck. John says he has a plan to make a stand, saying Rachel is dead and carries her body over to the Bunnyman, who hops on out of his car, and Bunnyman goes to pick up Rachel and put her in the truck. Then Bunnyman takes 20 years to close his door. She stabs him in the neck with a pair of scissors. Then John and Rachel drive off in the Bunnymobile, to which Rachel says,
You're gonna need a lot of therapy.
We then get some footage of the Bunnyman wandering around in the sunset. And that was Bunnyman 2011. During the credits, there's a bunch of family-looking footage of the three antagonists wearing bunny outfits, covered in blood, killing people, making effigies or statues, all of which I felt like maybe could have added some lore or overall story elements. As I wonder, was the family a bunny-worshipping cult like Stan's dad in South Park? Who knows? I certainly don't. Nothing is explained, and I wouldn't even know some of the characters' names if I didn't try to piece it together with IMDb. In fact, during this entire review, I've been getting names wrong, as you probably could tell. Let me just go ahead and say it. This movie is awful. It's definitely one to sit down and make fun of with your buddies, if you're into that kind of thing, but to sit down and genuinely try to enjoy it is not something I recommend. The story has absolutely no idea of where it's going. Normally, for a slasher film like this, I wouldn't care, except they keep trying to add more and more elements to it. This weird, twisted family dynamic between Bunnyman and Melissa and their stupid dog. The random disappearance of Jacob and how Pa apparently used to beat him stupid. How Melissa's motivation is to kill because other girls are prettier than her. All of it doesn't add up to anything or make any sense. There's no real motivation. Now, some people might say, but Michael Myers doesn't give a reason for his murder. Actually, we have several different reasons depending on which timeline you decide to follow. The Cult of Thorn, the fact that he's just born evil, the fact that he had a rough upbringing. There are explanations. This movie just doesn't have a Loomis to explain it. If it just had Bunnyman killing instead of this weird cult of bunny family, then maybe it could stand a bit better on its own 2 feet. The issue is that it could have just been a simple indie slasher, but it tried to add more elements than it needed to. There were tons of moments that I felt like could have just been cut out completely, like the conversation with Boots that went nowhere, the little drama squabbles between the protagonists that were just there to be an attempt to create tension and boost runtime overall, I think. The best thing this movie had going for it was Bunnyman. Bunnyman as a slasher entity is intriguing. The look caught my eye, which is why I decided to dive into this trilogy in the first place. Like I said earlier, even when he takes off the mask and we see that wonderfully done makeup on, it's intriguing. You know Kane from WWE? That's what a lot of people thought his face was going to look like underneath the mask. I'm saying that because it looks great. It looks fantastic in my opinion. There is potential here. I just don't think it was capitalized on in this one. So I'm going to have to give it a 1 out of 10. Leave a comment below and let me know what you think of the movie if you've seen it. What movies do you recommend I talk about next? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to y'all later. Gotta get on to the next Bunnyman movie.